Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. On today's episode, I have Chip Nellinger from Blue Reef Agri Marketing. Chip, how you doing today?
Hey, real good. How you doing, Casey?
Good. I got Regina Nargis and Aaron filling with me as well. And today we want to talk to Chip and get his perspective on what's happening in the marketplace since Thursday when the WASDE report came out and how the market's reacted in the last couple days.
Yeah, well, we got a real friendly report in the case of corn. Pretty big cut in the carryout due to increasing demand. It cut the carryout all the way down to 2.1 billion and change. So that's thinking back towards harvest time frame, the market was expecting something north of 2.5 billion. So this demand is really picking up in corn. We had a really strong day on Thursday when it came out. Friday, a little bit of a down market because of a big move lower in wheat and beans. So we kind of stabilized things today. A lot of this has more to do with weather in South America, as well as some precipitation chances for the dry areas of the plains. So that's what's kind of driving things right now, more than the WASDE report from last week.
So what happens if this weather that we're talking about coming in towards the end of the week, what's going to happen if that weather forecast doesn't pan out and there's no moisture in the forecast anymore?
Well, if right now it does look like the market is assuming that there is going to be some rainfall in Argentina, anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain in some of the drier areas. It's probably too late to really do much as far as adding bushels to them. If they totally miss that rain, though, or it's way less than expected, the bean market will take back a lot of what we lost on Friday and probably be blowing into new highs very shortly. So, it's at this point now what actually happens. The market is expecting some actual rainfall. The issue is, though, whether it rains or it doesn't, they know that they've done damage to yields, and, it's going to take till the combines start rolling down there to figure out really how much yield damage there was. And as a secondary part of that, there is maybe a small chance of some rain in some of the dry areas of Kansas, Oklahoma. That's less, I would say, less confidence in that forecast. So although the market got hit a little bit at the end of the last week, and overnight, last night and in the morning, the wheat market reversed and actually closed higher. So I think the wheat market kind of is questioning whether it's going to rain or not, and probably believes that it actually isn't going to materialize in the plains.
Great. So looking out for the rest of the week, do you have any big thoughts maybe going into what might be some winners and some losers?
Well, Thursday every Thursday is the export sales report, so the market's going to look at those export sales numbers Thursday morning. Especially corn, we've had a really strong pace the last 10 or 12 weeks to make sure that can keep going. And also, they're going to be watching pretty closely on the case of beans, whether we're seeing any additional demand here that would normally materialize, whether that's beans, outright beans, or soy meal that would be the benefit of a lower crop in Argentina. So export sales on Thursday morning are going to be a big part of this. Obviously, the weather forecast and how much it actually rains in Argentina is going to be part of this going into the midweek and the end of the week. And then ongoing, a 2-week forecast as far as the plains go, as far as wheat. So it could end up being a pretty volatile week here, mostly based on weather and whether we get some export sales confirmations of some big numbers on corn and beans on Thursday.
Of your clients that you have down in the Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas area, and in the reports that you've been reading, how much of the wheat has not actually come up this year? I mean, they have a hard and fast estimate of that.
That's hard to get an actual estimate. There is some of that. There's some with very poor stands right now. For sure, moisture would help. Help some of that come. I don't know whether that would end up making anything. But I think it's a little bit too early to tell. That's what the market's trying to figure out in its mind right now is, all right, is it going to rain? When's it going to rain? For sure, if you got some rain here in the next 3 or 4 weeks, it could definitely help what's there and really add some yield to that crop. But the clock's kind of ticking for them, and if you don't get much more rain, there just may not be much of a crop in those areas. So that's what the market's going to try to dictate or figure out as we go forward the next several weeks is, how much abandonment is there going to be in the wheat? How much does it rain to help yield? And what is the actual potential for final yields there in Oklahoma and Kansas?
What do you see happen with the cattle market because of this?
Well, we've already seen, I think, some big numbers on the cattle and feed report the last couple of months as far as placements go. That would be wheat, pasture calves. That just there wasn't anything there. They went directly on feed instead of going out on pasture. So I think we've already seen that a little bit, which has pressured or shown some extra supply there. In the very short run, though, I think the cattle market's probably looking beyond what's happening as far as wheat goes. And for sure watched the corn report from last week and saw that was friendly and probably a little bit of a different scenario than we've been faced with the last 2 years in corn. But more importantly, there is a lot of supply out there. The last 7 or 8 cattle on feed reports have shown increasing supplies. And so although the cash market is still fairly firm, it's off the highs, but still fairly firm, the market's looking ahead to bigger numbers, and really any bounce you see is met with pretty heavy selling pressure in cattle. So it's a pretty ugly scenario right now as far as the technical picture in both live and feeder cattle go.
Last report I saw, there was looked like everything was positive going into the close here today. So do you think everything's going to stay that way and we're going to end up positive for the day?
As far as the cattle go, you mean, or the grains?
Grains.
Yeah, so we had a nice reversal in wheat and closed well. Beans kind of came off the overnight lows as well, and corn was kind of roughly flat. So all in all, pretty good performance is that they're getting beat up a little bit on Friday, but they may have overdone it, being Friday and anticipating some rain. So probably took a little bit of that rain back, and now it really just becomes, how much is it actually going to rain in Argentina? That's going to be important this week as you go into the end of the week.
Right. Back to the wheat thing real quick, Chip. With as dry as it's been for as long as it's been in the big chunk of the wheat belt there, how long, do you have a guesstimate when that's really going to have an impact on the market? Because, given the fact there's wheat everywhere, there's plenty of it. What kind of time frame do you think, if the weather doesn't shape up for those guys, that there will be an impact, and will it be enough to matter?
Yeah, that is a loaded question. So I think there already has been some impact on price, right? We're off the lows, and the funds who had basically a record short position, they've come out of that short. They're still a little bit short Chicago wheat. They're net long Kansas City wheat. So it has already had an impact. But what has kept the lid on it is exactly what you said. There's tons of wheat in the world. There's a lot of old crop wheat supplies here domestically, and there's a lot of wheat in other parts of the world, and there's no real major weather problems right now in other parts of the world. So, I think if you get 4 to 6 weeks, you call it about this time in April, mid-April, third week in April, and they haven't had much more precipitation there, then I think it becomes a much bigger issue. But the rally, so if that happens, we likely haven't seen the highs yet in wheat, but it will be muted a little bit, which normally maybe that would be enough to push us well over $6 in Chicago, and maybe $6.25 to $6.50 in Kansas City. That's probably going to be muted a little bit by 20 to 40 cents because of those big supplies that we have left.
Right. Okay. And if it's $10 and you don't have any, it doesn't matter.
Well, that's true too. Unfortunately, it is a case where we have some domestic demand here from the feed and food side of the equation. Our exports haven't been very good. That's really something that struggled. And there's plenty of wheat in other parts of the world. So, unfortunately, the world wheat situation can withstand a supply shortage. The problem is it's going to be out of the plains. And if you're sitting there in Kansas, Oklahoma as a producer, it's not a very good situation because number one, your yield's going lower and you're not getting as big a price boost as what you really need because of all this supply in other parts of the world. So now, a year from now, it will start mattering, but unfortunately, in the short run, due to the supply situation, the rallies can come. There can be higher highs, but I think it will be a little bit muted because there's plenty of supply out there.
Has the market reacted any to the signing of the iron or the steel and aluminum tariffs? Has that done anything to the commodity markets at all? I'm sure the outside.
Yeah, it's caused a little bit of choppiness in some of our grain markets. I don't think it's doing the livestock markets any favors. That might be part of the reason every bounce you see in cattle and hogs have been sold. So there's a lot of concern there on the livestock side that maybe some retaliation will involve pork or beef. There have been some fluctuations and some pushes lower in the grains, but some of the weather issues right now are overshadowing that. But it's definitely a concern. You just have to take it as it comes and figure out who's going to retaliate with what product. You know it'll come. You just don't know for sure what it will be. And the good news is, in the case of China, they might talk up a lot that it's beans, but they have to take some of our beans. They can't source enough out of the southern hemisphere, especially with the drought in Argentina. They've got to take some of our beans. Mexico and corn. Not that that's a tariff issue, but a NAFTA issue. They almost have to take our corn as well. They can try to source some from other areas, but it's just, logistically, they almost have to take it from us. So there is an overriding concern on trade, whether it's NAFTA or retaliation on these tariffs. So far, it hasn't affected the grain markets. I think it's been a little bit of a negative drag on our livestock markets, though.
So there's been a lot of talk with the ethanol tax credit and the RFS. That's kind of a big panic, I think, in any corn grower right now, is that if that would go away, what would happen to the market? Can you kind of expand a little bit on that and where that may or may not be heading?
Yeah, so that would be a huge deal. The biggest concern right now isn't that they're going to change the renewable fuels standard, that number, the blend amount, but they backdoor it by changing the RINs program, which gets a little complicated and complex. Net, that's going to be met with heavy resistance, obviously by groups like National Corn Growers, and they have a lot of people, a big voice with the lobby there. And so I think it's been pretty clearly put to the Secretary of Ag as well as higher up the chain to President Trump that, hey, this is part of the reason, that I guess is inarguable, really, that you're in office is the ag sector in the heart of the Midwest. And so it is a fear, like these trade issues, the tariffs and NAFTA, that there is a fear. There's some talk on that. But I think there's been enough of a voice that they see past that and don't do a lot. But you never know. That's the fear on this thing. So it's almost like the trade issue, the tariffs, and that. You almost just have to wait till it happens. The market will react negatively if they do mess with that. There will be an immediate court battle if they do change that because that's a law, and so they can't just with the drop of a hat not follow the letter of the law. So if they do something, there's going to be a huge court ordeal, and it may be way down the road that this thing gets figured out. But you just have to take it as it comes. Right now, the hope is they don't do anything. That it's a lot of talk, and that cooler, calmer heads will prevail. Everywhere from I think the president on down, certainly Secretary of Ag has a lot of people in his ear in the heart of the Midwest here saying, hey, that would be a really bad deal. So my hope is, fingers crossed, it's all talk and that they decide not to do anything or make any changes there.
All right, Chip, well, I think that's going to wrap it up here. If guys want to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
Yeah, best way is just call our office at 309-550-7213. And we also have a lot of information on our website. That's www.bluereefinc.com.
All right. Well, Aaron or Gina, you guys got anything else before we shut this down?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, Chip, thanks for being on the program, and we'll talk to you next time.
You bet. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.